Hey guys, I'm sure you're wondering why this isn't Tuesday Q&A. And that's because scheduling conflicts. The problem with setting a show that is supposed to go live is you are going to sometimes have scheduling conflicts. So instead, we thought it would be a treat to bring you the episode that aired on September 7th of 2015. This was with David L.D. Gorman almost 2 years ago now, the first time he ever appeared on Defense of the Patients. It was really interesting for us because this was the first time we had spoken with somebody who knew the inner workings of Beyond the Summit. Obviously, LD would. And it was an amazing experience. You'll also notice at the start of this episode, we were doing intros that were funny, or what we thought were funny at least. So kick back, relax, and enjoy this DotP classic. I re-listened to this episode, and you can definitely tell that the personalities that Cyphus and I are today were definitely different back then. Maybe not mine as much, but it's a good episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks so much.
You know when you've been injured. You may feel afraid, worried, and anxious. Whatever you do, you feel vulnerable and can't lane the way you once could. Things just don't feel like they used to. These are some symptoms of being injured in lane, a serious medical condition affecting over 9 million Dota players worldwide. While the causes may differ, the condition may be related to damage sustained from enemy creeps or even aggressive enemy heroes. But there's hope. You shouldn't have to feel that way anymore. Prescription salves can offer hit point regeneration in lane, getting you back to maximum HP and restoring your confidence in lane. If you suffer from being injured in lane during the laning phase, consult your local support about prescription salves. Prescription salves are not for everyone. Heroes currently in combat should not use healing salves as their full regeneration effects can easily be broken by sustaining additional injuries in lane. Prescription salves do not provide permanent regeneration and may need to be reapplied at later times if heroes suffer from additional injury in lane. Prescription salves should not be used past the mid-game. Ask your doctor about other healing options if this situation applies to you. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Defense of the Patients. We're a gaming podcast with a Dota 2 problem. I'm your host Cyphus. I'm sitting here with my co-host Roland.
Hello!
And if it sounds like I'm rushing through the intro, that's because I'm very excited to get to our guest today. Caster extraordinaire, the man behind the summit, beyond the summit, David L.D. Gorman. L.D., welcome to the show, sir.
Howdy, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I've started listening to your show lately. You guys are great.
Oh, well, thank you. We that's a compliment.
Whoa.
It's a compliment that means a lot. You are arguably one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name in Dota right now. Beyond the Summit, the premier studio, the Summit tournament series, incredible to watch. So we're really excited to get you here, figure out what makes you tick, how you got to where you are, and just kind of start getting into all of that.
So we have a co-host as well. His name's Easy Marchese, and he's like, we got to get the king on the show. Is how I referred to you. He's like, LD is the king, the king. And so I guess we succeeded. Although I guess you and Gods have kind of like a king and queen relationship or king and king relationship? How does that work?
So Beyond the Summit was... I don't know how much you want me to go into the history.
All of it.
Yeah, we're down to
the short origin story is that Gods started commentating probably a year before me. He worked for Gosu Gamers about 4 to 5 months after the International one. There were a ton of European tournaments. Toby was casting almost everything from Europe. What he wasn't, Purge or Gods were the other two big ones. Luminous did a little bit with the Premier League, but it was like basically those guys as the English commentators. Almost everything was specifically just European Dota, and some of the North American teams, I think, would play with the ping disadvantage. But there was nothing for Asia, nothing for SEA, nothing for China. And as I recall, the way David tells it is that IceFrog actually approached him and was concerned about the fact that they were planning to do the International 2. Nobody in China or Southeast Asia had any events to play. There was no prize money, but more importantly, there was no opportunities to practice at all. And obviously, from a Valve point of view, they want the game to... This was when Dota was very new. The beta was closed at that point. It was hard to get invites. The player base wasn't that big. And there just weren't many tournaments. So the origin of Beyond the Summit is that Gods had already wanted to run a tournament for a long time, and having that conversation with Ice Frog, he's like, you know what? I should run an Asian Dota tournament. So he came up with the idea of the Gigabyte Dota Masters. Gigabyte and Twitch supported the event, and he didn't want to cast it on his personal channel. That's literally the only reason he came up with the name. Beyond the Summit sounded cool. That was about it. He made the channel. He ran the Gigabyte Dota Masters, and he figured, that's it. I'm probably done. But then he ended up getting asked to help cover and organize, to some extent, the International 2 Eastern qualifiers. He was more than happy to do it. This is where I come in. He couldn't stream. He was in Australia. So literally, my big break was that the guy who was supposed to be in charge of English coverage for the International 2 Eastern qualifiers could not stream. That's how I got my big break on the big stage. I ended up streaming every game. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, so it's a 12-hour time difference. So, if the games start there at like noon, that means I'm starting at midnight. I had a roommate at the time who had a normal 9 to 5. His name's Drew. Very nice guy. I was pretty loud, to put it mildly, to the point where, he hadn't signed up for that because I wasn't a commentator when we started living together. I got better about keeping my voice down, putting a towel under my door. He started wearing earplugs, and it was a big apartment. Like, you have to understand that, like, the building I was in, it was probably like 25 feet. It was a brownstone type of setup, so it was like I was on the second floor on one end. Then you go up the stairs and go all the way down this long hall, and that's where his bedroom is. But I was still able to wake him up during the call.
Oh my god, the ice blast! It was fucking great. I can imagine.
That was where I had my first big Hypecast moment, because prior to that, I was a huge fan of Luminous, except I wasn't a good analyst at all, nor was I interesting. I didn't know the history, so I was basically trying to be Luminous, but without any of the stuff that made him an awesome commentator and really a pioneer of the time. So I was very bland and boring. But this was the first event where, for whatever reason, I think I'd been watching a lot of Toby. I just started feeling the enthusiasm because it was my first real gig with big name teams. Prior to that, I had mostly been casting Dota 1 games and replays and tier 2 or tier 3 teams. And I just went ham. And there was a moment where an anti-mage that was about to die ended up getting a lucky bash, and I just was like, the bash! This was before WoW. This was my first real explosion. But yeah, that very short version is that he came up with the name, he started the project. It wasn't a business, it was just a cool Twitch channel name so that he didn't have Triumph of Man or LD streaming on twitch.tv/gods, which makes no sense. And over the next 6 months, it evolved into a partnership, and today I would still say it's the same, except it's not just the two of us anymore. But there's no dictator or one person who just calls all the shots. It's very much a joint effort from the two of us.
So you're not the king then, huh? We don't have the king on the show?
Well,
Co-king.
I think I'm the more publicly palatable in terms of David will say things that sometimes rub people the wrong way. I mean, I have in the past as well, but I think I tend to go down a little more smoothly for your average viewer. So I think I'm a little more visible, but I'm definitely not the guy in charge of everything and dictating. Okay, guys, we're gonna do this, and you're gonna be here at this time, and gods, you'll be casting this game, and it doesn't really work like that. We're very collaborative, and I mean, frankly, we're a startup. We don't really have a huge hierarchy. We're not Whisper Down the Lane, five layers of organization by any means.
Well, I mean, you'd have to have great communication and I mean, a great team in order to pull off what you guys pull off. I started watching. I think I was playing Dota or interested in watching Dota around Beyond the Summit 1, where I saw the video. It was a cool video that you guys had made, a cool animation, and there was a pretty hefty amount. I can't remember wasn't it 50,000, 80,000, something like that for this the Summit 1?
The Summit 1 was a base prize pool of 50, I think, and then it had maybe it was I think it might have been 75, and then the crowdfunding got it over 100K.
So it was exciting. It was holy shit! These guys just kind of came out of nowhere, started a tournament, and you had the teams, and you were showing the teams in such an epic way on the video, and it was wow, who are these guys? And Beyond the Summit, that's a cool name, and I mean, the name did go a very long way in getting me at least interested in watching, and then it evolved to this leather couch with the pros and LD. And it was really cool to see, oh my god, there's Puppy.
I remember you getting into that because I remember walking into this studio And I was like, "Are you watching the same damn couch video again? Like, what are you watching?"
The couch videos, as it was put when we were in our newbier days, where it's like, yeah, this guy just like sits on a leather couch with pros, and he just talks, casts games with them, and they're really good. You should check this out. And I mean, we're very new still. Like, we're still youngsters to this scene. We started playing right after TI4. So,
or right before.
Right. I didn't buy
You're babies, baby.
Yeah, we are babies.
Yes.
I bought the compendium to TI4, but like, I didn't really care who won. I watched the games, didn't really have a great understanding of what was a really good play, what was a really
Except
bad
that by
play.
the time the finals rolled around, you were
I was like,
pretty
don't
hooked.
tell me who won. Don't tell me who won. And then he's like, newbie won. And I was like, oh, you bastard. But he pulled some reverse psychology on me.
Guys, Dumbledore dies. Dumbledore dies.
Yeah. And anyway, I ended up watching them later and appreciating them later. But going to TI5, like, I unfortunately missed a lot of content because I was out there haggling people, you know what I mean? Like, yo, give me 45 seconds. No, 30?
Well, actually, so that brings me to a funny story that involves LD. The first interview that we did when we got to Seattle was right after we'd had breakfast. Do you remember that little Mexican restaurant that was just up the street from
Guave, it was called.
Was it Guave?
I think it was like something like that.
No, it was Agave.
Agave.
So we were up at Agave, and we walked out, and we looked to our left, and about 300 feet up the street,
I had eagle eyes that day, dude.
Was PPD, and then we looked to our right, and it was you and Gods
standing there,
and Roland, like, look, I could see it in his mind, like he didn't know what to do because you were to the right and PPD was to the left, and I saw him charge PPD, but out the corner of his eye, he was looking at you and Gods the entire time.
Just like, just stay there. I'll be quick with PPD.
And you guys had this look of, it almost looked like maybe a bit of horror. It was like, oh my god, that guy's gonna come talk to us.
And then that's definitely not true, by the way.
No.
As far as whatever look I might have given them. But anyway, go on.
I wasn't looking at you at the time. It was like, hey, PPD, give us 45 seconds. And he's like, oh man, I don't have 45
PPD's way
seconds.
more important than me, man.
he was like,
That's a legend.
I don't have 45 seconds. So I was like, all right, 15 seconds then. And I just kind of forced him into it.
But yeah, so unfortunately we missed the opportunity. You guys had just crossed the street at the time. But that was the first interview, and I could just see the dichotomy in his mind of, who do I go and talk to here?
Yeah, there was like I went slow-mo in my mind where it was like, I'd love to get LD and Gods, but they're just too far, and PPD's walking toward me. Anyway, it was a pretty cool experience. We were talking to Toffees, I think Friday we had Toffees on, and the point Toffees made was these people aren't really famous at where they come from. I mean, they're famous when they go to the international, but they're not so famous going into their local grocery store whatever city they live. So people are willing to give you interviews. So yeah. I found that really cool that everybody was so approachable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because for those of us who have gotten to work the international a couple years in a row, it's like it's kind of a ritual that you get used to, and it's I go to Chipotle, or I go out to have a few drinks, or on a date or whatever the case may be, and I'm never recognized. Like, I think I've been recognized a total of like 3 or 4 times in commentating for 4 years, something like that. And 1 or 2 of the times, it wasn't even me that got recognized initially. It was one funny story. I went through the airport security with Merlini, and the TSA agent stops him right when he comes through. You put your arms up in the little whirly scanner thing, and they make sure you're not carrying drugs.
Beep, 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 beep. Yeah.
And then they wave you through, and then they say, wait, we got to look at the results here. And Ben was in front of me, and the guy's like, oh my God, are you Merlini? And starts like getting really excited. Now, I walked away a little concerned because the guy definitely did not pay any attention at all to the scanner results after. He's like, that's doing his job as a TSA agent because he's so excited to meet Merlini. I'm like, just because Merlini commentates Dota and you like his casting doesn't mean that he couldn't be doing something that's a cause of concern.
The perfect terrorist, Merlini,
Yes, exactly. I walked away a little perturbed about the whole thing, and I mean, TSA doesn't exactly inspire confidence to begin with.
Yeah,
or comfort for that matter.
But yeah, so even half the times I've been recognized outside of TI or a big Dota event, it's not even me getting recognized. It's like, oh, and you must be LD because you're with Merlini or whatever.
Whatever. You're the most recognizable. For being babies, like you said, TI4, we just started. It was your face and Toby. Basically, it was Toby and LD, and then a myriad of pro gamers sitting on that leather couch with you, which, by the way, looks wildly comfortable. I mean, you guys get real close.
It's cushy. Now, we made an improvement. So at the Summit 1, we had one couch, and it was for 3 people. But nobody wants to be the guy in the middle. Because you have at all time, you don't have an armrest, so you can't like retreat to your little corner. You're just kind of there, unless you want to hug it out. And not all the pro players are always receptive to that. So, so we upgraded. We got 2 couches. It fits 4 people as well, so that's a bit of an improvement. These are the big upgrades that really make the difference. And more importantly, everyone has their own armrest, which was like so nice to have. There's no shitty seats on the couch.
Well, tell us a little bit about the house. I mean, you guys are there, so you and Gods and the kind of the staple crew there 100% of the time?
Oh, so that's interesting. We've had some comings and goings over the years. So the original BTS house was not actually our house. So what we ran the Kickstarter or the Indiegogo, which I know you guys said before the interview you might want to talk about. Let's see if we do. So we ran the Indiegogo. It went pretty well. We decided, let's go ahead with this. It's been successful. We're going to move out to LA, start up our very small home-based studio. And we're like, okay, so first thing is, let's find a place. And of course, neither of us lived there. David was in Melbourne. I was in Philadelphia. So natural thing is, okay, how are we going to find a place? Do we have someone look for us? Does one of us go out there early? I mean, I was already in the U.S., so in theory, I could. But this is where Blitz comes in. Great guy. It turned out that I didn't know him that well at the time.
Yeah, he touched me in a weird way on the bar crawl.
He's a fucking weird dude. Everybody loves him, but he's a weird guy. Like, he's very comfortable touching, and
he said I couldn't touch back either. He was just like, I was on the street and he's touching me and I'm like, whoa, dude. And he's like, this is a one-way relationship, baby. And I was like, all right, well, keep going. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
I think he weirds people out so much when he touches them that like
I felt comfortable.
And they'll like leave him alone if so it's like almost like it's his move to like, yeah, get away from me. I'm gonna creep on you, and then don't get creeped out and leave me alone. But Blitz is a great guy. But so Purge had just moved out to LA shortly before that, which was part of the reason why we wanted to move here. Was Lumi was based in LA at the time, and he had been doing a lot of work with us. Purge had just moved out here, and Blitz was here. So already we had 3 people, 2 of whom were already established commentators, one of whom was a friend who Blitz had actually done commentating Dota 1 with Cinderin and Mad Mortigan. And I think Toby might have been the 4th person. I can't remember, but like way back in the day. Before there was any money or even video broadcast. It was all audio casting for the most part back then. So LA just was a natural fit because there were established talent that we could work with, have them come into the studio, be on camera, and do more of a show. So, but we need to find a place. So Blitz came in. He had a friend who had a bunch of empty rooms, basically. Pretty well-to-do kid who, like, his job was essentially being landlord for his family's second house. So we got a good deal with the rent at first. We moved out here. But it wasn't the BTS house proper. Like, Purge lived there. He had his whole... When we moved in, like, he had his whole setup, like, his entire corner of the room that eventually became our studio. So there were, like, countless nights where we would do a show, and Purge was sitting there just, like, waiting for us to end so that he can, start talking on his personal stream or record a YouTube video. So we always felt kind of like intruders, even though Kevin was very nice about it. Like, super cool guy to room with, very chill. Almost to a fault where, maybe like he's annoyed and he won't say anything just because he doesn't want to cause any drama ever. But we could be, I wouldn't be surprised if he found us difficult roommates at time just because of how much shit we bring in all these people and we're up at crazy hours and we're all up in a space. So that was the old house. So back then it was me, Gods, Purge. Merlini would crash with us when he came out to do events, but he was living in Chicago at the time. Blitz would stay over, but he definitely wasn't living there. Lawrence, who was the guy who was kind of renting the space to us. And then we had various visitors. Too Good came for a while. Bruno came for a while during the Alienware Cup. Lumi would occasionally come and crash just because it was a bit of a drive. But that was kind of the old crew. It wasn't really our house. And we had Kawa, who was our producer at the time. And that was a fun experience for him because he had never done it before, which is a great way to start things off. But
it is. Trial by fire is the best way to do things.
Yeah.
and that's pretty much been the story of BTS. It's always been trial by fire. We've had some help, but for us, it's always a new adventure, which is part of why I love doing it. But so then we moved to the new house. And so the new house has been myself, K-Pop Tosis. It was Iori when he first moved out here. And Merlini, very consistently. Gods is here, I would say, about 2/3 of the year. He's got family in Australia. His dad travels a lot for work, so they also have a place up in I don't even know what it's like. Is it like Newfoundland? Maybe it's like northeastern Canada. Might be getting my geography all screwed up. But
I'm pretty sure that's Newfoundland, northeast Canada. Yeah,
it's very cold there. Is all I know.
Yeah, just winter all the fucking time. Terrible place.
I don't know why the fuck anyone would. I guess it toughens you up a little bit. So he's in and out, but he's here more often than not. And the other fixture of the house was actually Roland, who was our intern from Malaysia.
I know. I've stayed there a long time. Other
Roland. So he's from Borneo. Awesome guy. It's a really funny story how we found Roland, which was... So he actually was... So we ran an Indiegogo, which is basically a Kickstarter, for those who aren't familiar with it. It's a way to crowdfund a project. Because we didn't want to move out to LA to start a studio and then not be able to make it financially sustainable. And to kind of give us a cushion and ensure that we would be able to do it consistently, we ran a Kickstarter. And the thinking is, if people don't like what you're doing or they don't want to support it, they won't. But we had a huge outpouring of support. And I think within a day, like 20, it was 20, like 4 hours and 30 minutes, which kind of annoyed us because we wanted to say it was in a day, but technically it wasn't quite in a day. We had reached our initial goal, which was $25,000. I think ultimately we got like around $35,000 in total support for
$39,494.
Yeah, just shy of $40K.
Yes.
So that's a good outcry of support.
I should know this because there's a Redditor that anytime anything goes wrong on any of our broadcasts ever, he'll always make some stupid post on Reddit, like, $39,494 production value right there. Anything about production is enough to buy like 1 or 2 good cameras, maybe 3, and that's about it. So it's really no money at all in the grand scheme of things.
No.
Production gear gets really expensive very quickly, but so yeah, Roland ended up living here for a really long time. He came in as an intern, and he actually was one of the people that donated $2,500 to the Kickstarter, which was the highest level of contribution that we had. It's funny because he applied to work as an intern, and we had no idea that he was one of these people who contributed. We didn't like put 2 and 2 together, right? There were, I think, like 800 or 900 people, something like that supported it in total. A lot of them just for $5 or $10. So there's a lot of names. So it didn't jump out at us right away. And eventually, it just kind of came up in conversation because we were working on outreach to all the contributors, and especially, we want to show a little extra love to those who really put out a lot of financial support. And we're like, this name's familiar. I feel like I've sent an email to that address before. Oh, wait, he's also applied for an internship. So we already had wanted to work with him. He seemed like a cool guy. It's like, all right, well, at this point, it just seems like it's a good way to show some love for him. And we had no idea what to expect when we came out. It could have been a disaster because basically we had never met him. We had a couple phone calls with him. He seemed really chill. He was well-spoken, willing to work hard, but you never really know. And we basically signed up for Roland to come live here for, 6 months plus. It worked out great. He's an awesome roommate. He's got a very Zen attitude. He's actually from Borneo, and I would say he's very Buddhist in terms of his mindset. Not necessarily religiously, but more just a very kind of like Zen, chill guy. And a lot of us can be high strung. I think it kind of comes with the territory of being like a play-by-play caster, especially where you're always looking to bring energy and kind of feed off of that. I'm just an intense guy in general. Gods is less so. He's definitely more relaxed, but he has his moments where he can be very opinionated and strong-headed. So Roland added this like nice, chill element to the house, especially because I mentioned myself and David, but Andrew or Zayori and Brian were both extremely. Andrew loves to debate. He's very opinionated in general, whether it's politics or whether it's current events. Like Andrew always has he's always very well informed about kind of random stuff that gamers might not be, and he always has an opinion, and Brian's the same way. So between the 4 of us, we really needed someone to like take the edge off a little bit, and Roland was just that guy that's like, hey, relax, man, it's okay, this isn't a big deal, like let's go outside and just have a smoke, or just shoot the shit for a little bit. So Roland is like hanging out with Roland is my therapy. So he's actually coming back for a bit, which is really exciting. I love having him around. But yeah, so that's a very long-winded way of saying we've had a lot of guests over the years. We did the TI qualifiers for TI4, and at one point we had like 15 people at the house. There were like 30 in LA. I think it was more like 20 in LA, and a bunch of people stayed at a hotel. Some of them crashed here. Gerg was here for a while. He's always a character.
Yeah. Yep. He's appeared on the show quite a few times. We also ran into him at the bar crawl. Told him I'd buy him a drink because his team lost so hard, but I couldn't find him after that.
There's no such thing as a drink with Greg.
Yeah, I mean, he's from Boston, for fuck's sake. Like the guy drinks.
You got to be able to put a few back if you're from Boston. That's just, that's just a basic modifier.
Yeah, I mean, Gerg Live and Uncensored was probably my first exposure to you in not such a proper format, in a more like let's laugh and have a drink and have fun format, which I appreciated. Because, in this scene, all too often people are made into gods, no pun intended, where, it's like, oh my god, like this Merlini, like he's beyond, a person, he's this giant personality. But once you go to these events, you realize, like, yeah, people are just people, and they prefer to be people. I was listening to Purge. Purge just started a podcast with Blitz and,
yeah, I actually listened to it last night as well.
Yeah, I listened to it last night. It was good. Purge, Blitz, and who else? God damn it. Hotbids. And he was talking like treating a personality is a lot like treating a girl. Like, you don't want to come on too strong at first. You know what I mean? Yeah, you want to play it cool. You kind of want to play hard to get, you know what I mean? But not too much. There's a fine balance there. And that was definitely the feeling at TI5. You don't want to be like, Wagamama, I love you, sign my boob. You want to be like, hey, Wagamama, how's it going? Like, playing it cool. Anyway, I loved that.
Bro, what's up? Give a little head nod,
Yeah, I loved that analogy of like, treat us like you would treat a girl you want to court. You know what I mean? That's how we appreciate it.
You might regret that with some people. You might regret that comment with a few.
Like, hey, sexy, how you doing? Like, who knows how you approach women? I don't know. So I do want to talk about this Indiegogo because it is pretty fascinating. First and foremost, I'm going to hit Wikipedia. In 2012, you from Gosu Awards, you got Best Commentator. You got Community's Choice Best Commentator in 2012, and you got Caster of the Year from Team Liquid in 2012.
And I've had no awards since 2013. As I'm looking at this now, I've really lost it, guys.
Well, you get your awards in 2013. Team Liquid, once again, Caster of the Year, Ghost Awards, Community's Choice Best Commentator, which is really the best one to get. If the community thinks you're the best, then hey. And then you start this Indiegogo, and you get $40,000. I mean, do you think there's any correlation there that people loved you, and then you got $40,000?
Yeah, sure. Of course there's a correlation, right? But, I think when you look at the Indiegogo, it like at that time, Beyond the Summit was myself and Gods. Like that was absolutely it in terms of commentator. Like, it wasn't a studio. There wasn't a big support staff. We had people that we would like hire to make graphics or to do translations for some of our early content. And to support us on specific projects, but we didn't have like a full-time staff. I think within like 6 months we had hired like a graphics guy who worked for us like 10 hours a week or something and did a pretty good job.
Oh yeah.
But at the time, like if you supported the Indiegogo, you're literally supporting LD and Gods. So if you hated what we're doing, if you don't like me, you're not supporting it, right? If you don't like Gods, you're probably not supporting it. So
it's an or situation. It's if you like either of them, you're going to do it. You have to like both of them in order to donate. Because if you hate LD but you love Gods, I'm not going to donate because LD is going to get some of that, So yeah, you're absolutely right.
That, and also just we weren't a larger org. Like, for example, I can be a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I'm a hardcore one, and it hasn't been very good these past 29 odd years or so. But I may not like certain players. Like, I may not be a Deshaun Jackson fan or a Jerry Macklin fan. Well, I guess now I can root for them because they're both gone. But, you can still be a fan of the team and of all the other players and support them. But when an organization is literally two people, if you don't like one of them, you basically hate half of the team. So you're probably not going to support them at that point. So I think back then, like, yeah, it's very much if you liked us as individuals and what we brought to the table as commentators, you would support us. I think now it's very different where we have a much larger pool of talent and we just have a lot of projects. So there are definitely people who hate me as a caster, but love the summit. And they can still support the summit because the event's great and it's not all about LD. I'm not even on camera or commentating, probably 2/3 of the event. And they can still have a great time. And then when I'm on, they just mute it, 'cause I'm so insufferable.
Which is the goal, right? It's no longer is it LD and gods beyond the summit. It's just beyond the summit, which is gotta be the goal, right? Building a brand to the point where it's not your name associated.
Well, so when we started, I feel like one of the big advantages, and we identified it very early on, and I think we did a really good job of taking advantage of it, was Toby was the biggest name in commentating, like bar none outside of Follett in Russian. But, as far as English specifically, Toby was the big name. I did the TI2 Grand Finals, but still Toby I think I walked away from TI2 with like 10,000 followers, which was great. It was like 10,000 more than I had at the beginning of the year.
You had a meteoric rise. That they also talked about that you came up very quickly in the Dota scene when you started. So
yeah, I got lucky. I worked hard. I got the right breaks. But yeah, I think if you look at like the current active commentators, the only other person who may have risen as quickly as me or even quicker is Odie Pixel. But outside of that, like Purge had been casting for a very long time. Gods had been casting for a long time. Toby had been around for ages at that point. So I definitely got a lot of opportunities very quickly, and because of that, I kind of came out of nowhere to a lot of people. But at the time, I was not nearly as popular as Toby, even though I'd done the grand finals. Like, not even close. Toby was the voice of Dota, and, for some, he definitely still is. So we identified early on one of our big advantages was that it wasn't just a one-man show. It wasn't just the LD show. It's never been the LD show. It wasn't just the God show. He had a lot more followers than me back then. It was very much, we have a group of people, and you might hate LD, but that's okay. You're going to get to listen to Gods, or Luminous, or Purge, who would come on and do stuff with us on occasion, or later on, Merlini, when he joined us, worked with us more full-time, or Blitz would come on here and there. We had AUA 2000 out for the TI Hub when we did the TI3 qualifiers at the old house. Mm-hmm. We've always felt like, when it comes to talent, people are always going to have preferences. No matter how good you are, there will be people that hate you. There are people that hate Toby. There are people that hate Odie Pixel. There are people that hate me. There are people that hate Winter but love Merlini. There are people that can't fucking stand fucking Mad but adore Wagamama. That's just how it goes. Everyone has their preferences, right? It's very subjective. So,
do you feel like Beyond the Summit kind of gave an outlet for these personalities to better expose themselves? I mean, was it your goal to kind of build the community? Or were you guys looking more for like just a legitimate, hey, we want to build a brand and make some money kind of a run?
Well, if you want to just make money, Dota and esports are not the right business for you. I would say like the one exception now is maybe if you happen to be a top player, then you can make a lot more money than you might at other lines of work. But first of all, you can't count on being a top player. It's really fucking hard. And then secondly, it's a matter of staying on top. Like, you might make a lot of money once, but it's not reliable. So, no, it was never, let's do this for the money. And, frankly, the work that I was doing before I started Beyond the Summit, I would have made a lot more money, been a lot more stable, and had a lot more free time on it. I was a business consultant before I started. I had my own practice. I had my own clients. I set my own hours. It was, frankly, a lot more of a chill work schedule, but it's not something I was passionate about.
Now, right? Is there any correlation to starting Beyond the Summit being a business consultant? Never mind. We'll not ask that question. I kind of want to dig into the rumor mill for a second, LD, because this is something that a lot of our listeners have talked about, a lot of guests that have come on have talked about, and something that we were curious about. The invites to the international. There was a big upset that Coddle Guy didn't get invited. And then something about a blog you wrote, and then he got invited. Do you honestly think that your blog was the reason he got invited, or it was just a coincidence?
I don't think my blog was the reason he got invited. I think it might have gotten him invited if they hadn't already changed their mind. And I do think they changed their mind, though I don't know for sure. But the chain of events was... that was the last day where invites were going out. Zyori was one of the last people to get his invite, at least for the English casters. I think they announced Red Eye and Chopra separately later on, but I think that was maybe an intentional way to like make that its own exciting announcement because Red Eye is such a big name in esports, and everyone was like, "Who's going to replace Too Good as a host?" He's it's hard to follow in those footsteps, but Red Eye is one of the few people who was established and proven enough to be able to do it. But outside of when people announced, as far as actually when they got the invites, Andrew was one of the last people. And we were actually commentating at an event. I think it was ES Portal, one of the last days of the event before we took our pre-TI holiday. and he got invited. And I told him Dakota was actually casting something else at the time, the BTS Americas. I told him, don't announce it yet. Let Dakota at least finish casting so that he's not like distracted. I'm sure he's already stressed out if he's going to get invited, because at that point, people talk behind the scenes, even though nobody had announced publicly. And, obviously he's realizing, oh shit, maybe I don't get an invite. So that day, the chain of events was later on in the evening, everybody announces their invites. Dakota doesn't hear anything, and he tweets something to the effect of, well, guess I didn't work. Guess I wasn't good enough this year. I wasn't invited. Best of luck to everyone.
I love Coddle Guy, man.
And so he's an amazing guy. Yeah. Super genuine, just very hard work. I think he's actually like top 3 hardest working commentators on the scene, no question.
Yes.
But so he tweets that, and then Reddit made a thread. Someone on Reddit made a thread about it, and within like an hour, it had 1,200 upvotes. Whoa. I had already been working on my blog under the assumption he wouldn't be invited. And I released the blog after this Reddit thread was already out. And then shortly, I think someone at Valve sees the Reddit thread. It's pretty obvious from the way they assign the caster games at TI later on, where instead, like Zyori and Kato Guy basically each got like a half shift compared to anyone else. Like they each had, like they were sharing Purge. And everyone else had their own designated partner. So from that alone, it seems kind of obvious that Valve wasn't planning on inviting him, sees the Reddit thread, sees the overwhelming support from the community, and thinks, oh, we fucked up. We better invite this guy. Well, but it didn't seem like they had a plan for it.
I'm glad they fixed that fuck up, because that was the one thing. I'm watching the analyst desk at TI5, and to the left of me is Coddle Guy. And I look and then look again. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Coddle Guy. I'm like, hey, I'm Roland. I'm from Defense of the Patients. How you doing? He's like, oh, hey man, I've heard of you. How you doing? I'm like, hey, good. Talking to him about it. And he's just like, he has his notebook out. He's writing things down. Like while we're at TI5, he may not even cast another game, but yet he's still writing things down. It's like, dude, like you're inspiring. Like, and I told him this. I was like, I mean, your meteoric rise is inspiring. The fact that somebody can see your talent and say, hey, look, this guy is talented. He doesn't need to wait. We don't need to make him go through 4 years of grueling work. He's here. He's already got it. Let's get him in the spotlight. He gets in the spotlight. He brings a certain charm, great camera work. I mean, he is very good on the camera, and he's funny. And that is something that I appreciate as a baby to the scene. Like you said, is I want to have a fine balance between intensity and yeah, that play was badass, and some lightheartedness, you know what I mean? Some comedy. And Coddle Guy is I feel like the perfect breed of those
and it sounds like he you mentioned that, like, not putting him through the grinder of running through 4 years worth of casting, but he sounds like somebody who has done a ton of work. I mean, he is always working. And he's putting in that extra effort to make sure that anytime he's on a cast, he has some type of note to go back to.
Well, he takes pictures of his notes, and his handwriting, for one, is impressive. And
it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. I have awful handwriting. I also hold the pen rolled, so I can only write for like 2 minutes before I start cramping up. So when I was in college, I was a philosophy major. So like your exams are like write an essay for 2 hours, basically. So I'd be like taking the essay, like taking the exam, and like every like 5 minutes, like, I'd like, my hand would be cramping up. I'd be like stretching it and squeezing it, and like, God damn it, this hurts like a bitch. So first of all, his handwriting looks better, and secondly, it comes naturally to him. So yeah, I'm super jealous of that. But to your point, he's actually been commentating for a reasonably long time, I guess, at this point. I think it's 2 years. The thing with Dakota, I think he's just an amazing ambassador for the game. Like, I think if you're just going to take someone from Dota, like, and put them on camera, and you take someone who's not even an esports fan, just a random guy off the street, they're going to look at Dakota and the way he handles himself on camera, the way he talks about the game, like, this seems kind of cool. Whereas I feel like, there's a lot of people, like myself included, where it's like, I'm not necessarily representing the game in a way where it's like, oh my God, like this is really polished and professional and slick. There's two kinds of audiences, right? There's like your hardcore established audience, and then your casual audience that either knows little or nothing about the game. And I think Dakota is the perfect person, maybe more than anyone else in the scene, to reach that casual audience. So
I completely agree. And I mean, you've got to figure, we just hit like 12.05 million unique accounts. So you got to figure that a lot of those are really new players. And how I know is I'm cute.
And a lot of them are Smurfs.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are
chunk.
Smurfs, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we assume 10 million players. The way that I judge a really new player is when I get into a pub, because I'm a very low MMR, and they don't have a compendium or something like that. Like, I think if you're a really invested player, you probably spent the $9.99 or whatever to get the TI5 compendium. It just came with so many perks, it was worth it. And also the way people play, you can tell, okay, yeah, you're really new. But those are the people that Coddle Guy is really going to bring into the scene and make them hardcore. So they buy the TI6 compendium. So they want to watch more Dota. They want to see more of him. And that's what I really appreciated about Coddle Guy is, I mean, when we started this podcast, Coddle Guy was getting drunk and dressing up as Coddle on his stream and playing. And it was hilarious, and we really loved him. And we got Greg Laird on, and we were hoping to get Coddle Guy next. And then all of a sudden, meteoric rise.
Yeah, he was just busy as hell.
He just blew up all of a sudden.
I think more just that he was out
working
there,
so hard.
Yeah, he was working constantly.
Well, and he had a job at the time, too.
Yeah.
He was working, I can't remember what his job was.
He was a waiter at a kind of ritzy New York restaurant. So, being a waiter sucks. You're on your feet all day.
Yeah.
You're at the mercy of your clients. Like, sure, it's a nice restaurant, but rich people are stingy too. They don't always tip well just because they have money. So you work your ass off, and then who knows if you get paid well. And then if you do, you're exhausted anyway. So you have some asshole drunk customer who doesn't want to leave. It's not a fun job by any means.
No.
But he would come home, and then he would bust his ass at commentating. And before that, he was an actor, and he's actually a trained actor, which is, I think, a big part of why he's so comfortable on camera. Like, I think if you look at everyone in Dota, I don't think there's anyone who's just more of a natural on camera than Dakota, which is something that is the polar opposite of myself or Gods or even a Zyori or a Toby or a Capitalist. We all sort of figure it out and get better at it, and some of it you can learn gradually and just realize as an outsider, but nothing replaces professional training, and Dakota has that in spades. So exactly. I think that's a big advantage he has. But I mean, in general, just working though, he's inspiring. I consider myself one of the hardest workers in the Dota scene, but being around Dakota makes me want to work harder, whether it's watching the way he takes notes, whether it's looking at just how much time and attention he puts into the game. Like when a patch comes out, Dakota will get his notebook out and start writing the key things that he thinks are important. And it might, a lot of viewers are like, why the hell are you writing with a pen and paper? That's stupid. Well, hey, there's actually studies which
dual encoding.
Yeah,
it improves memory retention. So the act of writing it out again makes you remember it better. And it's just the way he operates, right? He's on the older end of the personality spectrum, though you wouldn't know it by looking at him. Mm-hmm. He's actually a year or two older than me. So
I want to make a comment there because you're right with the memory. But writing it down is always a great way to do it. But you have an incredible memory yourself.
I mean, Capitalist was saying, you are his inspiration. There was some Ask.fm where Capitalist kind of went over all of his inspirations in the scene, and you inspired him to recall. He said that you have some of the best ability to recall a game from 3 years ago that was, a qualifier match that this exact same thing happened or a similar thing happened, and you can just bring it to the forefront and spit it out. And
which honestly I think is invaluable for making esports a little more palatable to the public. In the way that professional sports are, when you're like, hey, look, when we look back at these games and these guys were, eight runs down at this point in the series, they were never coming back. I think you help build a narrative and do have that incredible recall, which further supports building a narrative, not just within a tournament or within a game, but maybe across the lifetime of the sport as a whole. Which I think is very important. Do you do anything other than just, is it just natural memory, or do you have any little tricks? Do you do anything like Dakota does in that regard?
Geez, that's a tough question. I definitely would say it's automatic. I think mostly it just comes down to I cast a fuckload of Dota. I have the most games cast out of anyone except for Toby, and Toby's been doing it for 2 years longer than me, and he also did Dota 1 before me. And I also think that it's just the way that I approach the game, where I like to kind of give a personality to a team. My style is very much like you look at some commentators, like Merlini, for example, to me is like a polar opposite, where for Ben, like he'll recognize when a team favors a hero, but it's very much like Zeus versus Leshrac, not, FY playing Rubik, versus the way that like Hiroki plays Rubik, for example. I'm all about the nuances with the players and the style of the teams, because I think a lot of it comes down to, I've cast a lot of Asian Dota, Southeast Asia, and especially Chinese Dota over the years. And our audience is still mostly Western. Even when you cast SEA Dota on Twitch, if you're English channel, you're still probably getting like 70-75% Europe or North America. And the rest is a combination of Southeast Asia, Oceania, South America. You've got a few Russian and Ukrainian viewers in there because, they're just clicking around on Twitch. They don't know there's a Russian stream or whatever the case may be, or that stream crashes. But the upshot is, I don't know how familiar you guys are with like faceless robot syndrome from StarCraft, but basically, there's all these amazing Korean players in StarCraft, right? And to the Western viewer, because most of the players don't speak great English because it's not their native language, they don't have personalities that they can see, so they just assume that they have no personality in real life, and they're boring people, and they're all really fucking good to the point where it's almost like a computer is playing the game, not a real person, because there's no way a real person could possibly be that good. So there's an element of that it's still a remnant. I think it's slowly dying down, and I think Beyond the Summit has done a lot, and we're really proud of it, to dispel that perception over the past 3 to 4 years. But when we started, especially, like, there had never been a Chinese Dota tournament cast live on Twitch. Never. What? And in fact, never live broadcast. There were replay commentaries. Luminous was the first person I think who started doing them, or one of the first anyway, where he'd like take a replay, he'd go on YouTube, he'd record something, and he'd upload it for his audience, but it was never live. So the first live Chinese Dota broadcast in Dota 2 was the G1 League. There might have been a few games that Toby did in Southeast Asia as well, but it definitely wasn't common. And it often was not live, or it's just an audio stream, and there isn't a really big audience. So average Western viewer had never experienced that before, didn't know the players, didn't know the teams. And it's kind of natural when they're others, there's definitely cultural differences. There's differences in how the teams approach the game. And frankly, at the time, China was really far ahead of the other regions outside of Navi. And it's kind of natural to be like, oh, these guys are just robots. But I think that's where it really started for me, was I wanted to dispel that perception. And I also just cast them so much, I can see the differences. Gods was the same way, where we just have so much more exposure to these players and these teams from Southeast Asia, from China, on a consistent basis, that we know. It's like, no, Mineski doesn't play the same way as TNC. These are different teams. LGD and IG are completely different. Like, old LGD, back when Xiao8 and Yao were on the original version going into TI2, was nothing like Invictus Gaming. IG was like this balls-to-the-wall aggressive team, and LGD was like very calm and steady, and let's just fight for one big team fight, and we'll be a little more patient and organized. They're totally different, but to a casual viewer, it's like, oh yeah, they're a bunch of Chinese robots. So I think that's where it really started, and it's also just something I like to tell that story in general, even if there are no stereotypes that go against it. And so it's always really stuck with me since then. And I definitely think it's one of my stronger attributes as a commentator. And I would say it comes naturally to me at this point, but I wouldn't always say it was that way. I definitely had to work on it when I started. On
that point, do you feel like the videos that Valve did at TI5, that was kind of the first exposure to, I think, a lot of the Asian teams that any Western audience really had? I mean, is that kind of an effort from Valve to combat that faceless robot syndrome? Is that something you think the community really needs to continue doing?
Yeah, yes and yes. I'm not sure how much they're like, oh, we have to combat faceless robot syndrome. I don't know if they thought about it quite that way.
Sure.
I think there's definitely an element of, we have to tell all the players' stories. And it's not just the Asian teams. I think it tends to be them. But, like, for example, like, nobody knows who Vega Squadron is, really, as far as, like, their personalities. Like, sure, a lot of the Western viewers had seen them play because they play against their favorite teams from Europe, but that doesn't mean they really know who any of the players are. And the same could definitely be said about complexity. Like, some of the players, like Swindle Melons, had a bit of a history in Heroes of Newer, so some people knew him as Han Trash, and he's got this ego from NA Dota. So there's a little bit more exposure there, whereas you have almost none for the Asian teams. But still, there's always an element of, like, the lesser-known teams or the lesser-known players have a story to be told, and nobody's going to tell it before TI, because there's never those teams normally aren't in tournaments where they have the production resources or the time from the teams to be able to tell those stories. So I definitely think that was a part of it. I think Too Good deserves a lot of credit because he was very publicly critical of Valve after the International 4. We had him on for an episode of In the Studio after TI where he went on and on about how it just like, first of all, why is an hour and 45-minute pre-show? That was it was absurd. Secondly, they had a bunch of non-analysts on there for the entire time, and fucking Matt ended up kind of saving the show, and you know, as James sees it, and to some extent I agree. Certainly once the game started, he did. But I definitely think that, like, you look at the TI4 pre-show, they literally spent like an hour on EG, you know, who was the third place team, because I'm pretty sure someone who was working the event thought that EG was going to make it to the finals. They made this whole video about it. Then they lose the day before. Oh shit, it's Newbie Vici. We don't have a video for this. And then Alliance, because they were the TI3 champions, right? So yeah, I think part of it was they didn't expect it to be all China. I think secondly, they just didn't prepare for it. So I think that was a part of it. And I think the scene's getting a lot better. I also think Dota is the best esport in the sense that every region is competitive and has strong teams. Sure, you know, Southeast Asia's never won an international. North America really only has one truly proven team in EG. And then you've got China and Europe. Europe had a really bad TI this year overall, if you look at it as a region. But historically, Europe and China are the two dominant ones. But compare it to League, where North America and Europe have never, as far as I'm aware, have not done anything really in LCS in a long time. CSGO, where it's basically all Europe, and then you've got like Cloud9, who's been decent lately. StarCraft, where it's always the Koreans winning, more or less.
Yep, the Korean justice for sure.
That's what's really cool about Dota is every region actually can compete. And there's some kind of marginal reasons, like certain parts of Southeast Asia, the Philippines comes to mind, and South America, probably the biggest overall region that hasn't quite made it. But then you have Not Today, who made it to 2 summits and did pretty well there. And I think if they can ever figure out their infrastructure issues with ping mainly and servers, that I think even that region can compete. So I think a lot of this is a credit to Valve because it's so easy to watch replays. The international is free to watch for everyone in the client. So
which is so cool.
People from these regions where the game's not that big or not that successful can actually learn from the best. League doesn't have replays. CSGO does, but it's just like the game hasn't penetrated certain regions at all, and it doesn't exist in China. So, yeah, I think Valve has made a concerted effort at this TI, and I mean we're proud that I think we did a lot to pave the way for just more, you know, less like just bothering all these Chinese players and grouping them into one box, and more treating them as individuals, as personalities, and as teams. But I think Valve definitely set a new bar for what people should expect moving forward from big events.
They're growing up, for sure. I want to change topics a bit, because you guys had exciting news recently that you're bringing on Winter and Coddle Guy. We did talk about Coddle Guy. Real quick, I do want to ask, how long were you watching Coddle Guy and I don't know, thinking about, hey, we really want this guy to be working for BTS? Like, how long did you, I don't know, kind of pass the idea around BTS?
I don't think we really considered it for very long. I think we had been aware of him for a while. So we initially became aware of like who Coddle Guy was when they started High Ground TV. Before that, we knew Mott. He had worked with us before.
Okay.
It's interesting. We offered Mott a full-time job with us, and we wanted to bring him on BTS. At the time, MLG was trying to get involved in Dota 2, and understandably, back then, BTS was this somewhat lesser-known entity. We had just run the Kickstarter. Were we really a business? Could we offer people full-time jobs? As an outsider, it's understandable. Mott wasn't really sure, and he had what seemed like a decent shot at a job at MLG, who was, 8 to 10 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. Turned out they didn't hire anyone, but we offered him the job. He kind of hesitated about it for a while. So eventually we started looking further. We met Andrew or Zyori at MLG Columbus. I got a good vibe from him. I felt like he was hungry and he was passionate. And ultimately, we wanted the person that was like really eager to work with us. So we went with Andrew. But I had never heard of Coddle Guy before. So through Mott and through High Ground TV, we got exposed to him. And then they ended up wanting to be involved with the TI qualifiers. And originally they were supposed to be a part of the TI4 EU hub as their remote casters on like Join Dota 3 or whatever, because the EU hub was, I don't really know what happened there, but it seemed like James and Bruno had like they wanted to do like the couch thing and do something different from what we were doing, but they also were involved with Toby and Join Dota, and of course Join Dota is very similar to us, and they want to do more traditional coverage, and have a stream for every game and just fully present everything. And so they needed more casters because a lot of the people at the EU Hub were not there to commentate; they're there to be on the couch. So Cuddle Guy and Mott and What Is Hip or Greg were supposed to be a part of the EU Hub. We just felt like it's like we can fly them in. We have the budget for it. Why not let them actually be a part of a hub instead of like remotely commentating from their home? So we flew them all out. Dakota had this whole like ordeal where he was supposed to have like an 8-hour trip and then flights got canceled. He has terrible luck with travel and all his flights got canceled. It ended up taking like over 24 hours to get here. I think he had to sleep at the airport for a while. Poor guy. But he got here, he showed up. He's like, I'm ready to work, even though he had hardly slept. And that was my first exposure to him. He'd know nothing about the Southeast Asian teams. And for the TI4 qualifiers, it wasn't like 2 regions a day. It was like, first we do Europe, then we take however many hours off, then we do America, then we do Southeast Asia, then we do China. I don't think it was in that order, but you get the idea. It's like sequential, right? So He was constantly asking questions, constantly taking notes, and you could just see he was hungry to learn and to get better. So we really liked Dakota, both just as a person, as a hard worker, as a commentator. We saw a lot of promise. So after the international, Gods got quite sick. He had a series of sore throats and ultimately had to get his tonsils removed. But like when you have problems with your tonsils, a lot of the times it leads to fever, and he was often like rolling around in bed, not feeling well. And so Andrew had to shoulder a pretty heavy load for, I think, like a month or so while I was home visiting family and spending time with my parents. And so when I came back, we had to bring someone else in. So we asked Dakota, would you be open to coming here for like 3 to 4 months? We really like you. We'd like to work with you. And it can be kind of a trial for you, see what it's like to, commentate more full time. Cause at the time he had the waiter job, and, Dota was like, when you come home in the evening and you're not too tired, maybe you'll stream for a bit. And he agreed. There was no full-time commitment. He was a part of High Ground. We weren't announcing him as like, Cuddle Guy joins Beyond the Summit full time. It was Cuddle Guy comes to the rescue to help us out. And he came here. I think he had a pretty quick rise. He came in like 6 months after Zayori, and within 3 to 4 months, he already had almost as many followers, and just he brought something unique to the table. Really, like I think the soundboard was something cool that Dakota did. Like if you're a new talent nowadays, you want to stand out, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself. And for Andrew, as he's talked about many a time, the dreads were kind of his way of standing out at first. For Dakota, he had the soundboard, he had the whole Coddle cosplay, and doing the voices and stuff. You guys met you so he's brought that to the table. I think what we like with Dakota is he's very creative. He was the guy behind the Wayne's World video. Him and Dan, who's our kind of like regular video guy who comes in for the summit from Radio Edit AV, and it was really the brainchild of Dakota more than anything. And he just brings that like kind of fun, exciting, peppy like energy and just silly ideas that like I'm kind of a serious. I wouldn't say I'm always a serious guy, but I'm not the most creative guy. Dakota adds something I don't. I think David is very different from me, but in that sense, he is similar. He's not like his creativity is not like his strongest suit by any means. So I think we saw a lot of value in that from Dakota, and the guy is very likable. Like even if you should hate him, it's hard to hate him. He's a really nice. He's really hardworking.
Oh yeah, and he's so humble too. Was the thing that like when I was like, dude, you inspire me. He's like, oh well, that means a lot, man. Like really, thank you. And it's like, I'm just some random dude. Like you don't need to like thank me over and over and over. Like I mean what I say.
He's humble, but he is also. I would just want to say he is also very confident. I mean, I think that you have to be confident to be good talent. Like, if you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else? And Dakota is humble in the sense that he takes nothing for granted. He always works hard. He doesn't think less of other people, but he definitely believes in himself. But yeah, anyway.
What about Winter? Why'd you guys decide to go with Winter?
Man, I've been trying to get Winter to commentate full time with us ever since I did the G League with him in 2012.
Okay. So there's some history there?
Yeah, so the first time I cast with Winter was right after TI2. The first event we did was the G1 League, and David and I did that together. He was in Australia. I did all the production. He commentated remotely. We had a whole show plan. We did a lot of extra work. the next event we did was G League, and Winter really stole the show. There was, at the time, a lot of Reddit hype about him. Like, Winter is just, and he's maintained it to this day. He's just a genius as far as commentators go. Like, he sees it from the captain's perspective, and he sees the draft in a way that I think nobody outside of like a select few top pros can really say that they do. Like PPD and maybe Puppy to a certain extent. A couple of other players have commentated this. So I'm sure some of the Chinese players do, but I don't know what they say about the drafts because I haven't had a chance to watch or understand their commentary. And we had a lot of fun casting that event. It was crazy hours. It was his first time commentating. He was really nervous. Winter's a really humble guy, kind of shy actually, even though I think he's opened up and loosened up a lot. And there was a funny cast where we were casting. I think it was an I know it was an LGD match. I forget who the opponent was. And at the time, like Xiao, and still kind of is, although less so now, I think, was infamous for his patience, almost to a fault. Where the running discussion back then was that LGD International was so there was an LGD International team, a bunch of Western players who came under the LGD brand. They gave them salaries, they put them up in the team house, and it was like kind of a new experiment where you bring in these Western players and have them play as a team in China. And they did some interviews and we did some interviews with them, and we talked to them. We had them on to commentate once or twice where they all said, like, in order to win the game, like, Chinese Dota is the best Dota, because IG had won TI2. That was kind of the general thinking for most of the scene, including the Western scene. In order to beat these teams, you have to have a 20k gold lead, and you have to be very careful when you break the base. It was very difficult to actually get this back then. And LGD was the epitome of the style. They were ultra safe. And we had one cast where it was a really slow game, and it was like classic LG. It's like, guys, you've 30,000 gold lead, you've got the Aegis, got the cheese, just go fucking end the game already. Jesus Christ. and I love my slow, patient Chinese Dota. I'm like, come on, man, this is time. And we got on a tangent, and back then, Winter really believed in pipe as an item, and commentators tend to more than players, even until the current day. And he said, and Winter said, like, they have to get a pipe. And, then we're talking more, and they're not ending the game. And so everyone starts calling Winter Mr. Pipe. And at one point, I cracked a joke about LGD, and I forget the exact wording, but basically, LGD should look for a condom sponsor because that's safety first, right? So after that cast, everyone started calling us Condom and Pipe, and Winter's an incredibly goofy guy. He's like incredibly goofy in real life, but he seems very serious, I think, to a lot of people, like when he's on a paddle and stuff. But I love casting with Winter because I feel like I am the best person at loosening him up and just like get him to relax and be himself and be funny. And I don't have that with everyone, but I really have that with Winter. And I also think he sees the game and the drafts and the captain's mindset better than anyone except for like maybe some current active captains. And even then, it's one thing to see it. It's another thing to be able to convey it. And he's got a really good mix of both. So I love Winter. I love working with him. He's a really good friend. And we're like beyond ecstatic that he's finally spending more time commentating. I mean, it's so many of these pro players have the bug, like Fogged, Winter, come to mind as players who have like hopped around from team to team. Even like Demon, for example, though Demon is not as necessarily good at explaining himself on camera or being a commentator. But like even the pros who haven't made it, like they just love Dota and they just want to compete. And Winter definitely has that a little bit, but I think he's finally coming around and realizing that there's like so much more he can bring to the scene and to the table as a commentator. At least in the long run.
My first exposure with Winter was TI5, and I got 2 interviews with Winter while I was at TI5. So he was a super cool guy, very approachable. The reason I got 2 interviews with him is right as I was recording my first interview with him, I ran out of space on my recorder, and I realized that it didn't work. And I was like, "Hey, man, I didn't even get that interview. Can we do another one?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And it was just like awesome, like how cool.
Just the kind of community.
I'm excited
overall. LD, I realize we are eating up more of your time than we told you we would, but we want to make sure we get out the requisite plugs. I wish we would have gotten into your background, because I know you grew up in Philadelphia. I wish we would have gotten into that. because I got a ton of questions for you.
An excuse to get LD on to .p again.
That's right. That's what we're going to use it for.
Hey, man, anytime. I could go for 2 hours here, but I realize you guys like to keep these short and digestible.
Well, we have Suns fan Sajidine and Nahaz coming on today, so we have a lot of prep work.
You're busy.
Yes.
I got nothing to do, man.
But before we go, we're gonna get some plugs out there. Talk a little bit about the BTS series that's coming up, because you guys just announced that. And that's like a shoot, 180,000, right, in prize money for SEA?
Yeah, so the whole idea of the BTS series is to do something very different from most other tournaments. So, like, your average event right now, they want to get EG, Cloud9, well, Cloud9 maybe not, because now they have a new roster, but, like, the big Western teams, EG, Cloud9, Secret, whoever else they can cobble together from other regions, and they want to have the most viewers, like, the biggest possible stadium, whether it's ESL or DreamHack, or at least a large live audience. Very traditional style of event, but it's focused around like bigger is better and more is better. And the reality is, like, Dota has always been a very grassroots game. Before this game had an $18 million prize pool, people played competitively for nothing, and then they played for $500, and they slept on hotel room floors. And there's always going to be new talent that aren't discovered. And I think you look at this international. Perfect case in point. You've got CDEC, MVP Phoenix, Complexity, Aggressive coming out of nowhere, maybe coming out of nowhere for LG. Well, not out of nowhere, but, he had never done anything nearly like what he did at this international. Even players like Arteezy and Zai last year. So we think there's a lot of undiscovered talent. We think there are also certain regions that lack for opportunities. The big ones are in this order, I think: Southeast Asia and then North America. I think North America will be much less of an issue moving forward. Especially after EG did so well at TI. But basically the goal was to give all these players and teams an opportunity to prove themselves and something to compete for besides pride, where we're introducing a decent amount of money into the scene so that these teams can have a little bit of stability. I mean, obviously it doesn't pay for like all of the players' salaries year round for each region, but it gives them something to compete for, and it injects a decent amount of direct financial support, and it also is a nice, concise structure. So we're trying to address the issue with like these really long, 6-month events. We've been guilty of it in the past. StarLadder has. Old ESL had pretty long qualifiers. DreamHack had super long qualifiers where teams had to literally go to Sweden for a month to compete. I think it was Dream League Season 2. So we're trying to find a nice balance of premier live events as well as like more amateur, semi-pro type content that every team can have a chance at. And the Cup Series is basically designed to have regular opportunities because you have the majors now, right? So if you have, let's say you have like 3 big $50,000 events open to all teams across the regions, you're probably not going to get EG, Cloud9, Secret, or whoever. And even if you do, they're so spread out that there's going to be majors, there's going to be new roster locks, roster swaps. And the goal is to have like a 1 to 2 week cup. You win, you walk away with a portion of a $10,000 prize pool. It's not a big time commitment. It open qualifiers for every single one. And the goal is just to grow the amateur scene and to basically find the next CDEC, to find the next Aggressive, or PPD, or Zai, or Arteezy, or maybe Sumail, whoever comes to mind, through a different format. There's already in-house leagues, and that's great, but ultimately, to be really successful in competitive Dota, you have to play competitive Dota. And in-house leagues are more competitive, but they're not the same as real matches. So
for sure,
we think there's we felt there was just an opening in the market and also just something missing in the scene in general. And the whole goal was to grow that aspect of it.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, $180,000 from BTS is just, I mean, that's a great investment. And it's cool to see you guys trying to foster that scene and not just the content scene, but the player base. I mean, there are a ton of people out there who want to do that.
I mean, talk about a talent agency. BTS has definitely been a talent agency without calling themselves a talent agency. You guys have sought out some people that may have otherwise not been as noticed if they hadn't come to BTS, and that is something that the whole Dota 2 community can thank you for. I'll just speak on behalf of the Dota 2 community. Thank you to Beyond the Summit for providing great content. For letting us hear what the pros have to say about games. I feel like that is one very unique thing that BTS brings to the table is, I can hear Puppy cast the game. I can hear, Kuroki cast the game. I can see Big Daddy No-Tail cast the game. I'm a huge Big Daddy No-Tail fan. I like him. I think he's a cool guy.
He's a pretty fucking cool guy.
Yeah, and
you're not wrong there.
It's just cool to be able to be a fan of a player and then
get a little bit of exposure to them in a different way.
Yeah, and then you always have that staple of a professional caster and a professional player. And that is something that we all appreciate, obviously. That's why you guys are getting millions of downloads, 25 grand in a day, but that was like 2 years ago.
Well, hey, things are obviously looking up if you're investing 180 grand into the Southeast Asia
they
scene.
Are. So on our show, LD, we read reviews. We like to get our community involved. We have a review here.
Yeah, we know we're behind, guys. We're trying to catch up.
We're trying to catch up. So I'm going to go ahead and read this review from Wesley AK. It's been awesome having not only a consistent podcast about Dotas, but one that you can relate to in playing the game itself. I really like how the podcast has branched out to other games, even though I'm a Dota slave. The interviews that you guys are getting are outstanding.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I would agree there. Yeah.
I'm a pretty outstanding interviewee.
Yes, you are. Very professional work and overall quality of the listening is hard to come by. Keep up the good work, team. Maybe this lazy Dota 2 player will find his way to your group one day. Oh, and I recommend you to all my Dota buddies. Thank you, Wesley AK.
Yep, we appreciate that review. We love the review.
Yeah, super nice. The community fucking always surprises me with how cool and accepting and nice they are. From just the random player to the guy who organizes tournaments for $180,000. It's really surprising. Thank you to everybody who's made us feel at home, and thank you, LD.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was really my pleasure. I like what you do. It's kind of a more relaxed format than some of the other shows, and hopefully you'll continue to get guests. If you need help, let me know.
Yeah.
Ooh, really? Shouldn't have said that
on air. Yeah. Now we got that recorded. So if you guys want to find LD, you can find him on Twitter at LDDota. You can follow everything he's going on, everything that he's doing.
You can find Twitter at LDDota.
That's right.
Mean?
Excuse me.
I'm like 4 orders of magnitude short. But
he streams on Twitch at twitch.tv/LDDota. And of course, you guys can find Beyond the Summit. They've got a Twitch stream, twitch.tv /Beyond the Summit, and beyondthesummit.tv is the website where you can check out everything that they're doing. BTS is up to a ton of good stuff. If you have not seen a BTS tournament, if you have not watched a BTS cast, you guys have got to go out there and do it, because you're getting access to some of the best casters, some of the best talent, some of the best pros, and some of the best games. So they are doing a lot of things to build the community. You guys should be out there supporting them. Make sure you hit them up.
Buy the tickets. They're cheap. I have every Summit 1 through 3 ticket bought. It helps grow the prize pool. It helps inject money, like LD was saying, into scenes that need their salaries paid. It's totally worth the ticket. Who cares if you get a set or not? I've never bought tickets for sets. I buy tickets for content.
I'll admit that I've bought tickets for sets.
Not Beyond the Summit for me, because I like to, and
nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah. And definitely go to YouTube and watch them sitting on the couch. And now they've got...
Yeah, you should. Yeah. So that all of you have the experience that... imagine me, before I knew anything that was going on with Dota, walking in and seeing Roland sitting there watching random people sitting on a couch almost constantly. It was a very disturbing thing until
with my headphones and my face just up to the computer screen, like, dude, that's puppy right there. Yep.
Like, where's the puppy?
No.
Anyway, so thank you again, LD, for coming on the show. We hope to have you back soon, and we'll definitely hit you up again. Guys, if you want to find us, we're at defenseofthepatients.com. Follow us on Twitter at .p_show. Of course, on iTunes, search Defense of the Patients. We're on Stitcher, other podcast apps as well. Do the same thing. And email us at defenseofthepatients@gmail.com. So, until next time, this is Cyphus for Roland and LD saying good luck and Godspeed.